Okay, welcome to this discussion of AP Style and Punctuation, where we're going to learn the difference in Let's Eat Grandma and Let's Eat Grandma. So in general, the first thing to know about punctuation in the AP Style book is you may be surprised that there's a section of that in the style book, but there certainly is. And it actually trumps the dictionary, other styles we've used. This is going to be the resource we check on for our punctuation rules. So we use punctuation marks in general for clarity, not for confusion. Less is better. We're going to omit needless words. We're going to write for clarity. We're going to get rid of any extraneous marks so that every punctuation mark we use should have a point. A comma should either slow down or a period should end it, and a question mark is appropriate, but really try to limit the use of everything else. And you're going to see as we progress that we're going to focus on subject, verb, and action, choosing really strong subjects and verbs, focusing on the action of the sentence to write clear, and that means that also strongest sentences often have only one single punctuation mark, and that's a period at the end of the sentence. So check the AP Style book section on punctuation as you go back over some of the highlights here. The first to know is commas, and one of the things you probably already know is there's no series comma or Oxford comma. You can find an Easter egg in the PowerPoint of this if you click on this underlined commas slide. And so that means we don't have a comma at the end of a series. So series or Oxford comma are kind of synonymous, and so the one on the bottom is correct. Red, white, and blue with no comma there after white. The other thing to recommend about commas is to remember to use them in the case of setting off states, years, ages, or residences as appositive phrases or second descriptors. So if we look at this example, the world's largest corn maze is located outside Des Moines, Iowa, and is open year-round. It's grammatically incorrect. We need a comma after Iowa to set that off, and so you can see there in yellow we've added it, and now our punctuation is correct. Similar thing with year. You listen to somebody's birth date. She was born on November 20th, 1992. We add a comma at the end, and now we have it set off by itself in a series of commas, and its punctuation is correct. Same thing if you're listing someone's city or address of residence, a comma after cities like Evanston or Chicago, a comma also after the street address. Moving on to hyphens, you're going to want to be very careful with how you use those. We're going to hyphenate between adjectives but not nouns. There's rules about words that end in ly, and then also if you're using it as a compound adjective or a predicate adjective. Fancy way of kind of saying, are you using an action verb or an is to be verb? So you'll see there Michael has a 2-year-old son. The 2-year-old son, the 2-year-old part is modifying son. It's at the end of the action of what Michael's doing, so it's hyphenated. But it's not the case when Michael's son is 2 years old. You read the is almost as an equal sign, and then you don't use the hyphen. So again, know when to look that up if you're using that kind of description on ages. Similar, you hyphenate long-term strategy, but no hyphen when using ly as the modifier, whether it's an adverb or an adjective. So highly placed source, we don't put a mark there. So don't lose points by inserting or missing hyphens in these compound modifiers. That's a key bit to keep in the back of your mind as you go through this. The other place you're going to see hyphens is in prefixes, so consult the AP Style book for individual entries, tricky ones, words that have vowels that are 2 in a row, or prefixes that modify. Preeminent, cooperate, coordinate, you can see are all different. Also when we have numbers involved or capitalized letters or things like well as a modifier, in general we're going to hyphenate those kind of things, but you can look them up both under the entry for prefixes and under those individual entries in the style book. And then finally, you're going to use the rest of the marks very sparingly. I mentioned period, comma, most common, hyphen, and maybe some question marks and quotation marks that we've already covered. But you're going to sparingly use dashes or ellipses only when it's appropriate. Really try only to use those situationally when it's important. You can ask me questions about that. I'm glad to answer. And then the last two you're going to take a really great care with are exclamation points and semicolons. For exclamation points, I was a reporter for over 10 years, and I had professors and editors say you get 1 or 2 max exclamation points for your whole career. And that was certainly the case for me. I used an exclamation point one single time. It was appropriate to the story on coaches yelling instructions out to football players on the field, and it was inside a quote. And that's the only time I ever use an exclamation. So don't insert them in your stories. Go back, read them, edit closely if they're in there. Probably take them out always. And then finally, another strong one in the right situation that's great is a semicolon. So you can avoid issues with errors of commas and series commas if you have a laundry list or a grocery list of things you're listing, like this list here of sports teams. you can use a semicolon. And when you use that note at the end, that the last one and the Baltimore Ravens includes that semicolon at the end, so that's not the same rule as the series comma or Oxford comma rule, and you are going to use a semicolon there. So just be careful with punctuation marks, use them very sparingly, use them as appropriately, and consult the punctuation section of the AP Style book if you have questions so that you get everything correct. Thanks a lot.